25 years ago, the measles, a very dangerous and extremely infectious virus disease, were declared eradicated, eliminated in the United States. In the past, it had caused about 500 deaths per year, mostly children, but since the introduction of a very effective vaccine, the number of measles cases reported to the CDC fell to less than a handful every year. I'm Manfred Stapff, your host of this podcast. I welcome you to the real-world evidence perspective, which brings you truth, data, and candid content. In this episode, we will look a little bit closer at the data and the evidence behind the safety and efficacy of vaccines, measles, and any assumed or potential connection to autism. Remember, evidence can come from experimental studies and from the real world. Study data and real-world data can only become evidence if there is a good statistical analysis and if the data have a proper quality. So let's look at the details. What's so dangerous about measles? Measles are extremely infectious. When I was in medical school, one told us if there's a measles patient in the next room, you most likely get infected. Or if there was a measles patient in the room or in the elevator, and you enter the room or the elevator, 2 hours later, you most likely get infected. That's how infectious the measles virus is. The COVID virus was nothing compared to the measles virus in terms of infectiousness. About 60% of the measles patients are less than 20 years, so it's sort of a childhood disease, and 10 to 20% have to be hospitalized, often because of pneumonia. And unfortunately, around 1% of the measles patients die. Rare complications, also less than 1%, is an encephalitis, but the problem is that it can happen even years after the measles infection. So as it said in the beginning, the measles were very, very widely distributed in the United States before the year 1999-2000, before the introduction of a very effective vaccine. And now there are more or less just a handful of cases, mostly imported by travelers. However, if we zoom a little bit better, a little bit deeper in the past 25 years, we see that the measles are on the rise again. Also in Europe, the numbers are concerning, with an even higher percentage of hospitalizations and deaths. Why is this happening? Despite a vaccine is available, which has about 97% effectiveness. So we have to look a little bit closer into vaccines. Vaccines, at least since COVID, we know all a little bit about vaccines. A virus particle has a protein around. This outside covering allows the body's immune system to recognize and memorize the structure and the proteins of the virus and to create antibodies and to memorize that in case the virus later attacks, then the body has an immune memory and can defend. In order to create this immune memory, one has to inject the virus into the body. But one will not do that with an active virus and actively infect the body. Despite this was the original idea from Edward Jenner, who basically created the idea of immunization and vaccination. These days one uses inactivated or dead viruses or only the protein structure. It's basically like an army which gets trained by the picture of a tank or by a mock of a tank to learn how the tank looks, what shape it has, but the tank does not have any weapons, does not have any soldiers, will not attack, will not fight. This may be a little bit harsh analogy for peace-loving people, but there is an analogy. Tanks can be dangerous. They can attack. You have to learn how to defend the body. And viruses also can be dangerous, can be deadly, can attack, and the body has to learn how to defend, how to recognize and how to defend against this invader. So what's the problem? Why are some people skeptical about vaccines? First, some people question the safety of the vaccine. Since you give a vaccine to a healthy kid, to a healthy person, you really do not want to inject a problem into this kid, into this healthy person, if it does not have a benefit. So it's about the risk and the benefit evaluation. And indeed, a small percentage of people do not create antibodies. In 3% or so, they do not have a protection. It depends on how their immune system works, whether they are immunocompromised, whether their immune globulin creation is impacted or not. Another, a little bit more seriously discussed issue is thimerosal. Thimerosal is a preservative which is used in multi-dose vials. And it is a mercury compound and is said to release anorganic mercury into the body, and this mercury can create neurotoxic or behavioral changes. This is the hypothesis between thimerosal containing vaccines and autism. So first, it has never been shown in humans. This is a theoretical concept in animals. And second, almost all vaccines these days do not even contain thimerosal. Only influenza vials for multi-dose application may still contain that. But it has been removed from measles vaccines already 20 years ago. Let's talk a little bit about where does this come from, an assumed association between measles vaccine and autism. In this case, the MMR vaccine, which contains measles, mumps, and rubella. Everything started in 1998 when Andrew Wakefield published a paper and an observation on 12 children where he wanted to describe the association between colitis, an inflammation of the gut, with behavioral disturbances which were close to autism spectrum. More or less incidentally, the parents reported that the children also received the MMR vaccine. So Andrew Wakefield never really claimed or showed a proof of a correlation between autism and MMR vaccine, but the paper was used by all vaccine critics and was published, republished, and cited several times. You remember, if you have seen an earlier episode about the system of real-world evidence, you remember the stages of evidence. It starts with an observation, with a rumor, then comes a scientifically justified hypothesis. This hypothesis has to be proven in a clinical experiment, and the results of this clinical experiment have to be proven in a real-world observation on large numbers of patients or of persons. The Wakefield study never made it beyond perhaps a more or less reasonable scientific hypothesis. But several other studies then followed on large numbers, real-world studies, Cochrane reviews, meta-analysis on large numbers, and have never ever shown any kind of association between MMR vaccine and autism. Even in high-risk children, when, for example, an elderly sibling has autism, the younger sibling is on a higher risk because there may be genetic factors. Even then, the vaccine did not increase the risk. So where does this leave us? People decide because of facts or because of emotions. The facts are clear. Measles are a dangerous and very infectious disease, and there is a highly effective vaccine available for which no side effect, no association with autism has been proven on many studies on high numbers of children, high numbers of persons. But very often people decide based on emotions. It makes sense because 50,000 years, 100,000 years ago, when we were living somewhere in caves, emotions were very important. It was important whether there's a danger outside the cave, whether there is a lion, whether there is a snake. So we had to activate our flight reaction, and we had no time, and we did not even have data and facts to analyze at that time. So that's why we react so sensitive to negative news, because they may pose a danger for us. But in such cases, we have to activate our logical thinking, and we have to consider the risk-benefit ratio for an individual. How much is the vaccine protecting the individual, and how dangerous could the vaccine be for the individual? And everybody would agree, except those who are generally against vaccines, would agree that the benefits by far override any risk, if there is a risk at all. In the case of vaccines, there comes a second issue, the risk and benefit for the community. If you get vaccinated, you also protect the community, especially in a so highly infectious disease like measles. A measles outbreak can have a dramatic negative effect on the community, on schools, on villages, on towns, on countries, and also on the healthcare with a 20% hospitalization rate. Hospitals may be overwhelmed, and together with the precautions which are necessary, the healthcare system may break down in a local outbreak. If you are further interested in real-world evidence in research, but also how you can deal with information overflow and potential misinformation, I would recommend my newest book, Real-World Evidence Unveiled, Navigating the Maze of Modern Misinformation. It is available on Amazon as ebook, as hardcover, as paperback. I hope this short overview gave you a few hints on how to address such controversially discussed topics, and how to come closer to facts and evidence in research and in daily life. Thank you for watching the Real-World Evidence Perspective, which brings you truth, data, and candid context. Don't forget to like, to forward, comment, or subscribe this podcast, whatever you find appropriate. Thank you very much.